We are a specialist unit within legal aid that focuses on assisting women, children, and men in same-sex relationships that are victims of family violence. And if we look at just the data that we have within legal aid itself, in 75% of our family law matters, there's family violence present. If we look at the 2022-23 annual report of the Family Court, family violence was identified by the family consultants in over 60% of those cases. Our understanding of family violence has changed significantly over the past 30 years. When DVLU was established, which was 30 years ago, we did not have a Family Violence Act or legislation that governed the principles of family violence or how victims could get support. DVLU today is a service that consists of 30 staff. We have over 20 lawyers and admin paralegals supporting our service. Our goal is not only to provide legal services to our client base, but it's also to provide that social support to address issues to do with access to other services in the space of crisis care or support with engaging with the police. So the service has expanded quite significantly from where it started.
It's probably the leader in terms of provision of services, advice and representation in the DV space in the whole of WA. And because it's been established for so long, the collaborative relationships that we've got externally and internally are very, very strong, and they've been recognised as the leaders in that area. So we get a lot of referrals in and out. And work very, very closely with the other service providers.
I've had the benefit of being at Legal Aid for 20 years in many different roles, and what I can clearly see now is that DVLU was well ahead of its time. It was working with the social workers, lawyers, working side by side in order to get better outcomes for clients. And obviously when you're dealing with our client base, it's all about how you can most effectively connect, because it's a huge trust for a client to come in and tell their most personal details.
Now there's no argument. Family violence is seen as a core issue. It's seen as an important issue. It has significant funding and focus in the laws and in the courts and through funding and services. But it was completely different back in the 90s. Family violence struggled to gain attention as an important issue, and it struggled to gain funding, and there was basically huge gaps in terms of very little, if no, dedicated family violence services. One of the catalysts was the role that feminists played and that women's refuges played in advocating for family violence as an important issue and the need for services to go with it. They decided they would run a pilot down at the Magistrates Court. So they pulled a lawyer in from Legal Aid and had them doing restraining order duty lawyer services at the Perth Magistrates Court. So I think this pilot was enormously successful, and it both very clearly demonstrated a huge unmet need and gap in services. I think as a result, the state government did fund the establishment of a domestic violence legal unit to provide restraining order services for a period of 12 months. Initially, it had the 2 lawyers and a coordinator. The coordinator, who was Naudi Rossetti, also had, in effect, a management and operational management role. So she, in effect, coordinated and managed the unit from day to day, and the lawyers provided the legal services. The Naudi's role was also to provide non-legal support, and it was a range of things. So it was providing emotional support and brief counselling.
With the counselling, it was mainly to help the woman recognise their right. Sometimes they might not, they feel afraid, they didn't want it to be involved in anything else, and then it wasn't a matter of that, but it was a matter for me to help them connect with the women refugees or with the special service that provided assistance.
The setting up of the service initially with the non-legal staff member was hugely important. It just had a critical effect on the whole shape of the unit for years to come and what it's become. And it was an absolute masterstroke and the thing to do, because it was quite radical within Legal Aid at the time to have a holistic service with both legal and non-legal services.
I needed to contact the family law section to see if we could develop a pro bono team to give us help, because with 2 lawyers we were not able to do much. So it was fantastic. And then we started right away having them to support our team.
It was always very proactive from its inception in advocating to government, to the media, to the courts, to the police, about improvements to processes and systems that would benefit victim survivors. I think the unit had a role in advocating for the introduction of a specific Restraining Orders Act. Because prior to the Restraining Orders Act being introduced in 1997, restraining orders were just a couple of sections or a section in the Justices Act.
Sometimes people will say that that for sure that people are not going to actually change from a day to night just because there is a restraining order legislation. But I always thought that makes a difference. It's like a tick. We needed this restraining order legislation to have no one, especially in court and police, deny or find excuses not to provide that protection to the woman. So to me, that was fantastic.
One of the biggest suites of reforms to the restraining orders laws was made by the 2004 amendments. And a lot of what we were advocating for ended up in those legislative amendments. The introduction of police orders, which were quite radical at the time, giving the police the power to make a sort of limited form of restraining order, giving someone protection for a short period of time outside of the court system. Legal Aid advocated for the need for a closed court for the initial applications when women come to court for the first time. So one of the changes made in that 2004 amendments was to ensure that only the woman who was making the application would be present, and any support people or witnesses she wanted to have there, or she wanted to have an advocate there. Another change is for some women, particularly if they're very traumatised by the process, it's easier for them to put their story in writing. One change that we advocated for and that found its way into the laws was a right to have that accepted. So if a woman chose to do their evidence through an affidavit, the court had to accept it.
It was always something happening. I never thinking that we won't be able to do it. It was just, yes, we can do. People became very willing to work with us.
We did a lot of things working closely with the police. Beyond the training for recruits, the police wanted to develop some training, family violence training for police supervisors who were the sergeants and senior constables and above who supervised the rank and file police officers.
Legal work in the area of family violence is very complex, and we often rely on the specializations of other service providers providing support to our clients. We are engaged with other stakeholders as part of our consortium of services at the Mirrabooka Family Violence Hub, and we're also part of health justice partnerships as well with various hospitals. We have a presence at court locations. We do provide a duty lawyer service in Perth daily, and we also provide a duty lawyer service in Joondalup. With the changes in legislation, we now have shuttle conferencing services, which is a mediation style service that is designed to make it more accessible for victims of family violence to go through the court process in a less stressful and less adversarial manner. In 2020, DVLU established our Stronger Women's program. It is a very specific program for women in regional WA in the areas of family violence, care and protection, and family law.
They're absolutely committed to the clients and keeping the clients safe, and the results speak for themselves. They've got some outstanding results, and they just don't stop until they get what they need for the client. The main thing going forward now will be the collaboration of information sharing. I think that's really an essential issue, and education of the bench about domestic violence and family violence issues.
Even though we've done a lot and the scope of services has changed over the years, one of the things that is clear from the data that keeps on coming out is that family violence is still a significant issue in our society, and it's something that, even though we have dedicated services, it's something that we all have to look at. How do we advance? How do we add more to our services to ensure that our victims of family violence and their families are safe?
When I look back on the last 30 years of the Domestic Violence Legal Unit and my 20 years since I've been at Legal Aid, I definitely can see the huge progress that's been made in the way that the community deals with family and domestic violence. Honestly, we have a long way to go. I feel very proud of the work that Legal Aid has done. We are definitely trailblazers. We are so committed. The future of the Domestic Violence Legal Unit, in the simplest terms, is to keep doing what we're doing. because we do it so well.